everyone, and welcome to a new episode on Hyperbolic Orbits. Today, we have with us someone who is trying to solve one of the most important problems in space right now. We have with us Troy M. Morris, who is the co-founder and CEO of Kall Inc. KMI, a Michigan-based in-space logistics company pioneering sustainable orbital operations through innovative relocation as a service solution. A magna cum laude graduate in psychology and behavior analysis from Northern Michigan University, Troy combines a unique academic background with proven business acumen to tackle one of space's most pressing challenges, orbital sustainability. Under his leadership, KMI has grown from a startup to successfully demonstrating their reach capture system aboard the International Space Station, completing technologies for their future fleet of spacecraft. Troy, thanks a lot for joining us today, and I'm really excited to hear from you.
It's a wonderful refresher of how far we've come. So I'm excited to be here today.
Thanks a lot. So let's begin with a question I always ask the guests is, what was your education background? And the reason I ask is everyone has come to space doing wonderful things from a very different starting point. So what has been yours?
Yeah, so mine, as you mentioned so lovingly, is from psychology, human studies of how do humans operate in these large organizations, whether it's NASA and going to the moon, or your local government, or a factory that makes machine parts. Every group of humans, more than 3 people, has to sometimes figure out, okay, how are we going to do that? And so that was my very active field of study. There's a very academic path that you can take that I didn't have the opportunity to take exactly the way I was intending to. And so I ended up instead into the very practical business world of it. And so it was from that education and experience that my 2 co-founders went on a much more traditional aerospace adjacent trajectory, but it doesn't matter if you're a wizard with numbers or you're the best at making something mechanical. There still comes the part of, if it's a business, you have to sell it. If it's a business, you have to understand how it builds, and you have to organize and connect with others. So that's been my secret sauce, is using my education to help understand how other humans are dealing with this space.
That's quite fantastic to know. And then coming from that, how did the interest in space debris develop for you?
Yeah, so for us, it was something that, working from first principles, if you're going to be young, even before we were entrepreneurs, but just young aerospace interested folks, in 2019, reusable launch had just come onto the scene. Okay, Falcon 9s are re-landing. Oh my gosh, launch is going to cost like $1. What do we do next? And the issue we were running into, as you kind of walk down that mental path, is, okay, if everyone can launch anything for $1, that's a lot of stuff up there. Who's solving it? And at that time, there was no one on our side of the planet working on it. You had some early, I don't even think they'd been awarded their first contract by ESA out of Switzerland. You had some rumblings out of our good friends over at Astroscale out of Japan. But in the United States, it was mostly project here, a summer internship there, some long developed missions that have since then been canceled. And so I was like, okay, we need to solve space debris for no one else, ourselves. We were our first customer. As we went down that path, we found it's not just space debris, but that people are looking for mobility in all sorts of ways. You don't just use a tow truck for when a car is scrap. You also use it for high-value vehicles, or moving things that aren't vehicles, but just moving things around. So the tow trucks for space analogy has carried quite farther than initially just focusing on space debris. But we needed to solve the problem for ourselves if we had a future in space.
I really like that answer with an engineer's mind. I love that answer in that sense. And that brings me, your concept, the technology that you're working on focuses a lot on soft capture. So could you tell us, especially in the low Earth orbit, what are the major technical challenges for this kind of technology?
A lot of it is thousands of kilometers away, is how do you rendezvous with a unknown, uncertain mass, uncertain center of mass object with uncertain, just every detail, every knowledge of it is just basically null. You don't know much of anything. And so the first step that we found as the technical hurdles is closing that knowledge gap so that you can close that physical gap. So there's a host of available resources and examples through human history of the last, space age here of how do you dock with another object. Docking with an object that you don't know is a lot more challenging. And so being able to determine and sense a lot of that from a distance was one of the less appreciated hurdles that we've had to overcome, and many others are doing it for their specific things. I mean, if you're trying to do refueling, you have to do some of this, but we have the rather unique perspective of let's not work from the best case scenario, but let's start from the worst. Is that if you're talking to a dumb piece of metal that fell off of a rocket and wasn't even planned to separate, how do you understand where that is, how it's moving, and how we can address it? So I'd say the first big technical hurdle is that rendezvous portion. We've demonstrated 172 times the actual docking, grappling mechanisms of the mechanical linkages, the tentacles. So that one is still very challenging, but it's kind of almost a known case. And then it's the orbital dynamic movements thereafter. So it's a lot of planning before, planning after, but unfortunately to a lot of my team's hard work, the thing that's easiest to share and gets the most attention is the tentacles and the capturing things on the space station. But that's kind of the sweet spot in the right in the middle. I like to make a sports analogy of if you see your favorite player go and make a huge play and you're like, yes, that's so great. You're not seeing the 10 years of practice they did before, or the 2 weeks they're going to do afterwards of like, dang it, I could have hit that a little bit closer. I could have been a little bit faster. The before and after is what no one pays attention to, and that's where all the work is done. So I think those are the technical challenges for us.
Thank you. And I want to ask you some very important questions that a lot of entrepreneurs and anyone who's interested in the space debris business building ecosystem. And my next set of questions are related to somehow that. First, relocation as a service. It's a wonderful thing that KMI has taken up. Could you tell us more about what you're aiming with it?
Yeah, so the relocation of the service actually came from a customer conversations. We were developing out. We I think already booked our ride to the space station, and so we're now feeling in a comfortable enough position that this isn't just an idea. It's not on the chalkboard. It's not just in PowerPoint. This is an actual thing. Let's go start engaging with more customers than just our early champions. And as we talked with them, they're like, hey, that's all great for emergency service. Sounds cool. I have problems right now. I don't need to wait 5 years for something to be a problem. I have problems today. And their suggestion was, why would I be paying for a service when I've stopped making money? So if you've got a communication satellite that is working and making millions of dollars a year, and then it suddenly breaks and it stops working, there's not really a incentive for that company other than legalities and rules and regulations. There's no intrinsic motivation for them to want to now spend more money on it. It's throwing good money after bad. And so their point was, if we can extend the operations, kind of pay for itself as we go with this relocation as a service. Also, investors tend to look very fondly on the as a service model. So that's been very, very productive for us on both sides of the equation. But it was something that really came from listening to the customers. Customer engagement is the number one piece of advice I give to entrepreneurs starting, whether it's in space servicing and maneuvering or selling sandwiches. Customer engagement. You need to know what your customers want. Otherwise, you might be building the complete wrong thing, or just building it and offering it in a way that they don't even want, when they're like, no, I want simpler. I want easier. I'll take it right now. I don't need you to make my sandwich, 50 feet long. I just want it 2 feet long so I can walk into my party. What are you talking about? So I think that customer engagement part has really rung true for us on so much of the buy-in we're seeing for relocation as a service.
That's a lovely point that you said. Listen to your customers. If I may ask, space debris as a business model, space itself is a complicated ecosystem for business. On top of that, you add, like you said, something, you're trying to build a business around something that is no longer active. So for you, how has it been approaching or identifying the right customer segment for your business model?
Yeah, so for us, it's something that, again, really expanding beyond just space debris really made that a lot easier for us. There were some obvious players of, you can look up online right now, but stay listening to this podcast of, who has produced the most space debris. It's going to be the United States, the Soviet Union. I'm sure China has really caught up well with the Long March rockets and their recent expansions into space. But those are not singular elements. And it's something that the tragedy of the commons has been written about ad nauseum. solving space debris from a everyone needs to play together part is delightful. And I wish that we were in a world that could do that, that we'd come together as, some of the UN treaties were solved for peaceful use of outer space. That's not quite the geopolitical situation we're in right now, is that there's geopolitical fighting active, there's cold aggressions, there's all this distrust. And so we had to look, okay, if we can't get the nations to solve it, who's the next biggest players? Sometimes operating more is the commercial customers. And so working with them, that's where we again expanded from just space debris to that mobility overall. How do you provide maneuvering so that if you've got a fleet of hundreds of satellites that a company is operating, that's more than most nations on Earth right now, let alone have ever done in history. Those operators have simple interests. They want good service for their customers, they want good returns for their investors, and they want security for their employees. Those three things, if you can hit those all with the same solution, it becomes a very quick conversation from meeting someone at the booth or getting an introduction to one of the leadership to, in a matter of days, we're now talking to some of their decision makers as they have their technical team talk to us, be like, wait, is this real? Can they actually do this? And we roll video from the ISS, like, I think they can. So it's something that for us, it's been a lot of prove it to ourselves, prove it to our champions, and then prove it to the customer. We're not done with that. We're still working our way through fully proving it for everyone. But it's something that really understanding what is your customer's pain points and how can you address them. What are the pain points they're not telling you that they don't realize that they have? And for us, there was a lot of cost. It was a lot of, can you do this in this decade, or am I paying hundreds of millions of dollars for a solution for 20 years from now? I'm not going to be the vice president of this division. I'm not going to be the senator or the governor or the prime minister. I don't care in 20 years. It's a really hard thing for modern humans to think about, making investments for the long term. We're a lot better at thinking, how can I make this quarter more profitable? And so that's where we had to address our business model too.
That's some really, really precious advice from all the conversations I've seen among founders, investors, and the engineering teams and the business teams, that long-term investment is great, but you also need to think about quarterly results. So thank you for answering that. Now, if I may ask about the wonderful achievement that you've done, the test you've done on ISS, could you please elaborate more on that?
No, I don't think so. No, yeah. So it's something that, but again, the visuals do so much better than I do. So it's something that the International Space Station put it actually on their Instagram, one of the earliest calibration tests where Commander Sonny Williams, amazing scientist, person, astronaut, and so she unpackaged our mechanisms. I've actually got a similar model. This is not one of the flight units, but one of these tentacles, and there's 4 of them that they affix onto the Astrobee, a kind of drone that flies inside of the ISS. And so now you've got a spacecraft, the Astrobee, the end effector, our reach arms, 4 of them, and we had them put a stationary target in front. Just a dumb cube. It doesn't tell us where it is, doesn't tell us how it's moving, and let them go. And so deploying the arms, we're able to prove out again hundreds of times that the arms can affix, control, and non-destructively then release that object in front of it. And we tested that against solar cell simulates, like a solar panel, against mylar, against aluminum, against damaged aluminum, so that we could really, over the many different surfaces and the tests and the tumbles and the rotations, again, when you have hundreds of tests and so many generous hours of the crew and of all the support teams to get us this testing, we were able to test out an exhaustive amount of scenarios of future captures. And so what it proved for us is, 1, we can build good stuff. It launches, it flies, it goes past test certifications. 2, KMI can run the operations. My co-founder, Austin, was sitting at the command keys. Yep, we're primed, ready to go. NASA, go ahead whenever you're ready. it's something that proved a lot more than just the beautiful videos that, we've got a few of them online, more terabytes back in the archives as we're still going over the data and refining, and not every detail can be released. But it's something that we're very proud to be able to share as publicly as we possibly can. The ability to have that soft capture, have that frankly scary looking tentacle monster do something good, be able to do that capture so that as we expand outside of the ISS, we can be providing this service to help keep things safe, keep things clear, keep things better for everyone.
So, given that you did start as a very young founder, and your team has already achieved so much, now that you're going to move into one of the most complex segments of space exploration right now, mobility, in space mobility, how do you see yourself managing so much of the business and the company and taking the team forward?
That is a incredible question. It's, I think, on the surface both flattering and I think it also leads to my immediate part of the answer is that I I don't see it that way. Is that it's something that I get asked like, oh, Troy, as the CEO, as the leader of this organization, it's like leader. I comes from a very servant leader mentality. I took a lot of good courses, a lot of extracurriculars in my university years. Shout out to the Student Leader Fellowship Program from NMU, that them among many others instilled the idea that just because someone is leading does not mean that they are necessarily the only leader or the champion or the Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs has done wonderful things during his time on this earth, but also I like to reflect back to the Steve Wozniaks and the hundreds of engineers, software, hardware, electrical systems, etc., that are all behind the scenes. And for me, that is very important to know and recognize. And so for me, it's less of a question of, oh, how do I manage among other CEOs and decision makers? And I've been at national dinners and spoken national space councils and done international events, and those are all great. And the question that frequently comes to my mind is, how can I help the team on this? How can I help at electrical engineering? They have this question that they can't figure out. Oh, I'm sitting across from the scientist who discovered this principle. Let me just ask him. I don't know what the answer he's telling me is, but I can at least connect my team to the solution. And I think that's where it comes in, is connecting the right pieces is where I see my role as the leader. There's hard decisions, there's executive decisions that need to be made to move forward. If you're going to fail fast. We aim to not fail, but if you're going to figure it out soon, and collaboration. There's a proverb that has really made the rounds in aerospace the last couple of months here. I'm very excited for some sociologists to work their way backwards and see how it percolated and spread. But the expression goes something along the lines: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's hard to think of an industry that is more true than aerospace. Is that you can be the most brilliant literal rocket scientist in the world. You still have to pay attention to the weather. You still have to talk to the FAA. You still have to trust that your payload engineers installed things correctly on your beautiful rocket. And so it's the same for us, is that for us to do our job, we're relying on 1,000 people before us and 1,000 people after us, and unknown numbers right with us. And so that's where I see my role and our company's role, is being that connection, being that inner layer between the physical moving of things in space, but also the discussion pieces. That's where I see my role, as being able to communicate, connect people, connect ideas, and bring things together. I am not the best CEO on this earth, but I hope I'm the best CEO for KMI right now.
You remind me of the main character from New Amsterdam, Dr. Max, who always goes out and says, "How can I help?" You actually remind me of him right now. And do you think your training in studying human behavior has made you a kind of leader that actually people want to work with?
I am again so flattered with this, and I'm now going to request that my loving wife Jenna listens to this whole podcast so that she can see a little bit, because we watched the show, and definitely, especially in the first episode and first seasons, I will accept that analogy. It gets a little off the rails in the later years, but I think it's a huge element of it is that everyone brings their skills. It's something that, as you look to the history of human psychology, my bread and butter, it is really interesting that the models for how humans, the top scientists of their time, think about the human brain, it's almost always exactly what the latest technology fad is when we had discovered, the early elements, it was humors. When we discovered the steam engine, it's like, the human body is like a machine. We discover atoms, and it's these things just orbiting around each other. We develop computers. It's like, well, your brain is like a memory device. And so I'm sure as quantum gets better understood, we'll all redefine the human brain as quantum, but it's not. I like to think of it as, the human experience is the universe looking back on itself. And so to understand that, we turn to physicists and we turn to philosophers. I sit somewhere between neither of, yes, understanding humans is a very important thing if you're doing anything involving humans. And I've yet to meet a auto mechanic or a engineer or a salesman at your local shop who doesn't work with humans. So there's absolutely skills I lean on my team and others around us to have that deeper technical knowledge. But for me, it still comes back to humans. You could have the best widget in the world, but you still have to sell it to a customer, a decision maker, a congressman, and they're still human at the end of the day. Hopefully they're still human. We'll get some AI senators, I'm sure, sometime soon.
Okay, I can't say hopefully to that, but yeah, we will probably. That's a lovely answer. Thank you so much for this. Now, the business side of it. We understood your leadership in team building. Now, what would be your advice to, let's say, an entrepreneur? I'm not saying only young people who want to be entrepreneurs, but also people who have been working in industries and now want to start a space company. For them to understand how to develop a business model. And if we just pick one case study, like say, for space debris removal, active space debris removal, what would be your advice in that sense to such entrepreneurs?
I think the advice I would give to any entrepreneurs, I already touched on, foreshadowing, a little bit earlier here, is that it's customer engagement. I have a lot of great young entrepreneurs that I've gotten to meet more recently as I start feeling aged and experienced, and I look to them and I'm like, you've got energy, you've got excitement, you've got great ideas, you're solving water problems, you're solving healthcare, you're doing amazing things. I just play with rockets and talk to astronauts. You're doing cool stuff. And that's the piece of advice I give, is customer engagement. Find out what either your end user, if it's the medical patient themselves, or the customer, the person who's making the financial decision in between. They're the person that you need to convince. Investors, regulators, insurance, everyone else kind of comes along secondary, is that they are working through their slice of the problem, but it all comes back to that customer. And I love that you asked the question of not just new young entrepreneurs, but one of my favorite entrepreneurs, Jeff of Portal, another space company right now doing great things. Jeff, I say this with all the love and politeness in the world, he's not a young guy. He is crushing it out there with his team, and they're doing wild stuff, and I have wished but nothing of the best success for them, because I met him before Portal was a company. He was working in stealth. He, was working on some ideas. He engaged us in a very constructive, critical way. We were in the Creative Destruction Lab program. He was a mentor. He was helping us out while building his own company. He was already giving to others. And so it's something that, he's a great example of. He went out there and found a problem that I'm excited for us to have, in the future sign up for, is to be one of his own customers, because they saw a different aspect of this mobility equation that we're working on. And so, again, it doesn't matter whether you're 20 or 60 or 80. It's still about what difference are you making. There can be people who write a piece of code that gets used by thousands of people on the internet. You'll never quite meet them, but they just all rely on you. I think there's an XKCD comment that focuses on that. it's something that customer engagement part is the piece that rings truest for me. Once you have the customer engagement, you got to make sure you got a team around you. I was lucky that I started with the team, and then we found that customer buy-in and that customer market fit. But that, I think, is the element that I've seen brilliant, driven, excited humans miss, is they're excited about the tech, they're excited about the problem, but they sometimes miss the customer. And so I think that customer engagement part, if I haven't said it 15 times, I'll say it 15 more. I think that's the biggest element for folks.
That's really helpful and also very inspiring to hear from a real space entrepreneur that yes, focusing on customer is very important beyond all the tech that you're building. So thanks a lot, Troy, for saying that. And I know you have a long day ahead of you, and I'm really grateful that you took out the time to share with us. Any last piece of advice or words that you would like to share with any space enthusiast around the world?
I think for any space enthusiast, doesn't have to be that you're in the venture space community. You could be with civil space, national security space, working in a large, massive company that is making a difference. One of my brother's high school friends is in a company that just got acquired, and he's like, wait, what do I do? I was like, you won, you succeeded, you built up something big that someone else wanted, and now you get the choice, he does, between staying and continue to build things or go try something new. And so I think the piece for space enthusiasts is give back first. That's why I'm more than happy to be here today, is that I got this far from 1,000 folks before me giving me my first astronaut toy at my 5th birthday, a Buzz Lightyear shirt I had at 3 years old. We found a picture of me running around in it once. The school teachers, the civic leaders, and the scientists who spoke to the community do that. I always like to say, when people ask me, like, where are you going to find the best, brightest minds? And I turn to them in our children. I'm sorry, as smart as I might be, I know more things about a computer than Albert Einstein probably ever had the opportunity. And he knows more than Archimedes, because human society does better building on top of itself. And so that's my piece to space enthusiasts, is give first, build the community around you, whether it's showing your telescope to local kids, going to the library, getting involved in your community, go speak to children, or don't forget the older folks too, that the elderly have stories to pass on to us as well. But I think it's connecting intergenerational and giving back. So international, intergenerational, kumbaya, all work together. We're all on this crazy spaceship Earth together. We might as well work together.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have asked for a better episode today. Thanks a lot, Troy. I'm really, really grateful. And to everyone watching, please keep stay subscribed to this YouTube channel. And if you have not, please do. And please follow on Spotify, because every guest that comes on this podcast takes their time, precious time, out of their really busy schedules. All of them are working in space. And everyone is doing that because, like what Troy said, that pay it forward, give it back. So thanks a lot, Troy. And I hope we interact again soon. And all the best to KMI.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Yeah, follow, subscribe. You can also come find out more about KMI. We're pretty active on our social medias, so you'll find us at kallmorris.com. We love interacting as much as we can and have time for. We hope to do big things in the future. So thank you so much for having me today.